Right, I'm with Sandy Cameron again, who's off the final appearance, we are told. How do you, I mean, personally, you're human beings, you come here, you talk to all these people, hear all these problems. How does that make you feel personally?
Well, of course, we've heard a lot of distressing stories over the past nearly 6 years now, and that in some ways is what folk like Francis and Alice and I do in our professional lives. The key thing for us is a sense of, are we making a difference for today's children in Jersey, for the people who have been victims in the past, and most importantly of all, for the future children of Jersey. So I think we can say that yes, progress is being made, and this, in essence, that's what the outcome of our review is. A lot of things have been put in place, but there is still a long way to go. Things such as stabilising the children's services workforce, until that is stable, it's permanently led and effectively led, then there will continue to be issues and gaps in that. But there are pillars in place that should help avoid any of the problems that there have been in the past. So there is an independent Children's Commissioner with quite extensive powers. There's a children's rights officer in place who will see children regularly and who's got direct access to the Director General and the Chief Executive. And there is an embryonic independent advocacy service in the forms of Jersey Care. Now, when we started, none of these things were here in Jersey. Yeah. So those things are there with our intent that they should be part and parcel of a structure that would ensure that the kind of failures of the past don't happen again, but if they were beginning to happen, then they would be known about and reported and acted on.
I interviewed the Children's Commissioner just a few days ago, and I mean, effectively she's only just got her law, which she had to largely write herself, so it is new ground to an extent. But I mean, effectively she hasn't been in place for very long, so you can't expect magic fireworks straight away. But one of the issues I raised was the complexity of the new people who've got a children's hat. There are so many of them, the children's rights officers. Who does what? Children's Minister, which I wouldn't have thought was good. I think I've mentioned some of these things before. It's still not clear to me, and certainly not the general public, who is actually doing what.
Well, I think that's one of the points that we've reflected in this review, is that it's good that there's a commissioner, it's good that there's a children's rights officer, and it's good that there's an independent advocacy service. But really, quite urgently, these three groups need to sit down and produce a document that sets out quite clearly what their different responsibilities are and how people should be able to axe each of them and when that's appropriate. Otherwise, as you say, there is a danger that there is an overlap, there's duplication, and there's confusion in people's minds about where to go for help.
You flagged up a couple of points about the accountability of the Children's Commissioner, and when I interviewed her, she was saying, well, the children will call me to account. Well, that isn't going to happen, is it? Children haven't got the power. Apart from the 16-year-old girl who's addressing the United Nations today, it isn't the general thing for children to have the power, is it?
No, but through the Commissioner, then children should have a voice. But the accountability of the Commissioner is important, and what's important is that she is fully independent and that she's got access to all the information that she needs to have. Now, I think in Deborah McMillan, there is a very good appointment of somebody with a great deal of experience and certainly a huge amount of commitment. As you say, it's early days for her yet, but I am confident that we will see progress being made there, and working alongside these other components, I think there should be
huge staffing requirements. You were saying today about one officer, children's rights officer, maybe you want several, you could do with a load. That lady, there was a little kerfuffle going on, which people won't know, going on in the public hall today. There's a lady there with obviously some long-standing complaints about her children. I think she was at a meeting I went to the other night about deaf and hard of hearing. But there was a catalogue of complaints of failure over the years, and they've just taken their main officer away from that group.
Yes, we heard during this review of people who found it very frustrating in terms of how to make complaints and to be able to get a response. So we've said in the review report that that needs to be addressed. We know that there has been consideration of a public sector ombudsman, and we think that's a good, positive thing. We think there should be a statutory right for children to raise complaints, and maybe for other people, but our concern is about children. So they should have a statutory right to raise a complaint and have a response within a set time scale, because too often we heard people feeling that they had raised complaints and then they heard no more about it. Now that's not good enough. So all of that has got to improve.
Francis referred to fairly quietly about the bailiff's role today. Fairly strongly you were saying that really it needs to be looked at. The separation of powers does need to take place, and it's been rejected time and time again. And people say, well, what's that got to do with you as a panel looking at children? And that is still much the feeling of the island, isn't it?
Well, that was one of the things we commented on in our first report, and we've commented again today, that the Jersey Way is still a perception that is held by many people. So it's a serious issue, it's a real issue for people who see there being issues about the lack of transparency. One way of addressing that would be to look again at putting in place the recommendations in the Clothier and Carswell reports, and we've restated that again. There was a missed opportunity to be seen to be doing something about it.
Final thing, I haven't had a chance to read your report yet. Obviously, we heard fairly at length from Francis about the things that are likely to be in there. But if you were making, when I was listening to the report, you said progress has been made in many issues. But if I was listening to that, if that had been your first report, it would have been a pretty substantial condemnation of the Jersey Way, the system of doing things here. There's a lot of failures in there still, and if that had been your first report, that's what I'm saying, that would have been a very substantial condemnation, wouldn't it?
Well, yes, it would have certainly been a report that would have had criticisms of many aspects, and those are still there in Jersey. But I do think all of us who have been involved in this need to also be looking at the positives, about the things that are here now that weren't there 2 years ago, and most certainly weren't there in 2013 when we were first commissioned. So there is movement. Movement is perhaps slower than ideally many of us want to see, but the important bit now is that the momentum is continued, and this does not get slipped and does not get put on the shelf, but people actually look to make sure that it is delivered.
Okay.